let's face it, one of the worst things you can say about anyone in the world today is to call them a racist. The very label supplies the indictment. And in the case of Israel, you don't only refer to Israel as a racist state, as was done in the Zionism as racism resolution, but now you refer to it as an apartheid state. But apartheid is defined in international law as a crime against humanity. Therefore, this calling of Israel an apartheid state is not happenstance. Because people know that if you refer to Israel as a crime against humanity, then if it is a crime against humanity, this state has really no right to be. And if that is not enough, then you call it a Nazi state. So not only does it have no right to be, but there is an obligation on the international community to ensure that it has no right to be. And in polls that were done with respect to taking some 8 European states as case study, some 40% of its citizens, when asked, do you believe that Israel is behaving towards the Palestinians the way the Nazis behaved towards the Jews? 40% answered yes. And so we see the cumulative impact of the laundering of delegitimization under the rubric of the struggle against racism. And so the question then becomes, what do we do about all this? And what do we do about this lawfare? For reasons of time, I'm going to make some suggestions or proposals. This is an informed audience. You don't need any elaboration from me. But my generic principle and proposal here is that we have to come out of the docket of the accused, where we are always framed as the criminal defendant, and become the plaintiff, become the claimant. Not only the plaintiff or claimant on behalf of Israel, but the plaintiff or claimant on behalf of these universal public values. In other words, become, if you will, a melitz yosher, a public advocate for the very universal public values that are themselves being denied or corrupted in this laundering of delegitimization. Because if we make the case, and this is my first point, if we make the case simply that delegitimization is prejudicial to Israel, then the answer will be, well, it should be prejudicial to Israel. Israel deserves to be delegitimized. It is a major human rights violator, etc., etc. And so the point has to be made here that this laundering of delegitimization is prejudicial to these universal public values. And purportedly, certainly I can speak in terms of my own country, Canada, where the United Nations is part of our DNA, where international law is spoken of as a centerpiece of our identity, where human rights is held out to be an organizing idiom of our foreign policy, where the struggle against racism and hate was one of my first priorities as a Minister of Justice. If, as in Canada and in other countries, people mobilize around, embrace these universal public values, then our principle and position should be, it is that the laundering of delegitimization is eroding the integrity of the United Nations. It is diminishing the authority of international law. It is corrupting the culture of human rights. And it's demeaning the real struggle against the real racism. As someone who was involved in the struggle against apartheid, who was even arrested in the course of that struggle against apartheid, to say that Israel is an apartheid state demeans the real struggle against the real apartheid. Because if you say that Israel is like South African apartheid, that means that South African apartheid had a universal franchise, had an independent judiciary, had NGOs running around all over the place, rightly and good, in order to critique its government, was anchored in the rule of law and the like. That's why I say it demeans the real struggle against the real apartheid. And in this instance, it not only delegitimizes Israel, but as I said, in a world in which human rights has emerged as the new secular religion of our time, to say that Israel is an apartheid state, to say that Israel is the meta human rights violator of our time, is effectively to say that Israel is the new geopolitical antichrist of our time. And that's why I say we've got to combat the delegitimization, this laundering of delegitimization, by saying how prejudicial it is to these public values.